Hello, everyone. My name is Doreen Vanderstoep, and I am a storyteller, musician, and writer here in Calgary. Because February is all about Valentine's Day, I thought I would do this month's video about love. I would like to acknowledge Alberta Music for the grant that makes this video possible. I would also like to acknowledge that my video today is being recorded on the traditional territories of the Indigenous signatories to Treaty 7, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda First Nations. We also walk in the footsteps of the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. We are all treaty people. May we live with respect for this land and between all nations. So love, all about love today. So the first song I'd like to do is called There's a Long, Long Trail. And if you know it, please do sing along. There's a long, long trail winding into the land of my dreams, where the nightingales are singing and a white moon beams. There's a long, long night of waiting until my dreams all come true, till the day when I'll be going down that long, long trail with you. Sing it with me, won't you? There's a long, long trail winding into the land of my dreams, where the nightingales are singing and a white moon beams. There's a long, long night of waiting until my dreams all come true, till the day when I'll be going down that long, long trail with you. Now, my first story today is called Lost on the Beach, and it's a personal story. The summer that I turned 11, my parents took us on a 2-week holiday to Vancouver Island. They always took us on a camping trip every 2 weeks, and we were very excited to be going to the beach, Long Beach. We were going to stay at Green Point Campground, the gem of campgrounds on the coast. When we arrived there, well, it was late in the day. Many others had arrived late in the day as well, and well, the campground was already full. Environmental concerns in those days were not top of mind, and so the authorities directed all of us without a campsite about a mile up the road, and then directed us down onto the beach, and we all lined up along the driftwood, cars, campers, tents, like so many cars in a parking lot. But we were happy to get any spot at all. And so we quickly had our tent set up, our great big canvas army surplus tent. It was just big enough for the 6 of us, my parents, myself, my older brother, and my 2 sisters, as long as my mother was content to twirl herself around the center pole to sleep, which thankfully she was. Now, the trick to getting a spot at Green Point Campground the next day was to go very early in the morning and to stake out a spot that had been vacated by someone else. So the next morning, my dad drove my brother and me to the campground, and my brother and I sat down at the picnic table while my dad returned to break camp on the beach. While my brother and I waited, we waited some more. Minutes turned to hours, starting to wonder what was taking them so long. And I was getting worried. I imagined all kinds of horrible things in my 11-year-old brain. And well, suddenly I stood up and I said to my brother, "I'm going to find them." Now, he may well have tried to stop me, but I think at that point I was so determined it would have been akin to stopping the tide. So I marched through the campground, down the trail onto the beach. I figured that was the fastest way to get to where everybody was camped, on the beach a mile up. Well, I began to walk and realized it was quite misty on the beach, and I looked around and looked back and saw that the place that I had emerged from the forest was no longer visible. I had no choice now but to keep going. I didn't think about cougars or bears. I guess that way ignorance was bliss. Finally, after much walking, I finally arrived at the end of the row of cars and tents and campers. And I began to look for my family, expecting them to be there in one of the spots. Well, I happened to look at an empty one and noticed that the people next door had been our neighbors the night before. My family was gone. Well, I figured at that point I would probably never see them again, and the only thing to do would be to sit down on a driftwood log and cry. And that is exactly what I did. Well, the couple next door looked over and took pity on me, and the woman came over and asked me what was wrong. I told her that my family was gone and I didn't know how I would get back to them or where they were at all. So she asked me what had happened, and I told her that we'd gone to the campground and they were supposed to meet us there. She said, "Oh, no problem. My husband and I will take you there." So I sat and waited. It took them a long, long time to get ready. They had to finish their breakfast and, well, pack up their tent and all their belongings and brush their teeth. And well, I was getting quite impatient. Finally, they were ready. I hopped into their back seat and they drove to the campground. Of course, my family was easily found there. I barely waited for the car to stop before I jumped out and ran into my mom's embrace. I left it to her to thank my benefactors. The reason my family had taken so long? Well, they had packed up that big army surplus tent, but it had sucked up a lot of that moist coastal air during the night, and so it was heavier than usual. They had put it on top of the car, thinking that would be a good place for the quick drive to the campground. But as they were making their way off the beach, the tent had fallen onto the ground, and so they had to get help, in fact, to get it back on top of the car. It had taken them quite a bit longer than expected. And I learned a couple of important lessons that day. Number one was patience. It's important to be patient and wait for things to happen. And when it comes to adventure, it's probably better to plan it than to fall headlong into it. And that's my story about being lost on the beach when I was 11. My next story is about the love of friends. This is a little personal story. In March of 2019, the organization that I'm with, Storytelling Alberta, was putting on a splashy St. Patrick's Day concert. Now, we were having performers from other places other than Calgary. One of them was coming from Edmonton, Kate, and she was a wonderful performer. I was excited to have her here. And she was also getting a friend to come to the concert and to visit her here. But that friend was from all the way in Ireland. Well, you can imagine how excited we were about having an actual Irish woman come to our St. Patrick's Day concert. Well, this friend from Edmonton, Kate, and her friend from Ireland, Sarah, I invited them both to stay with me and my husband. And I really wanted to show them a good time. I wanted to show them a fantastic time, as a matter of fact. So I made them some lovely dinners, and well, the concert went off without a hitch. Kate did a beautiful job performing, and Sarah was very, very tolerant of our very bad Irish accents. And she said she quite enjoyed the concert too. Well, the next day was Sunday, and we decided to show our new friends a fantastic time. We had to take them to Lake Louise. Now, of course, it is the gem of the Rocky Mountains, and Sarah had never been to Western Canada before. And so we took her into the mountains to Lake Louise. Of course, when we drove into the mountains, she was awestruck by the beauty of the Rockies. When we got to Lake Louise, she was amazed at this enormous glacier at the end of the valley that loomed over the whole valley. And then we took her out onto Lake Louise because, of course, it was still frozen solid. And as she walked out onto the lake and she stood and she looked around, her jaw dropped. And she said, I have never stood on a lake before. Well, that made me realize that we can learn a lot from our friends, and that anyone who approaches the world with wonder, really, you don't need to show them a fantastic time, because wherever they are, it's a fantastic time. So the next story I'd like to do pays tribute to family love, and it also pays tribute to Black History Month, for this is a story that comes from West Africa. It's called How the Moon Came to Be in the Sky. This story features Anansi, which is a character very common in African storytelling. And this is a very interesting character. He's a shapeshifter and sometimes appears as a spider. Once long ago, before there was a moon shining in the sky, there lived Anansi with his family. Now, one day, Anansi decided he had to do some business in another town. Once he had finished, well, then he met up with some friends. And as often happens, the friends sat down and they began to talk. And they talked about all the problems of the world. Soon it was getting dark. Well, then Anansi knew that trouble was afoot, because night was falling and there would be no light for him to light his way home. And so he set off immediately. Well, the plains portion of his walk, well, it was quite uneventful. There was still enough light in the sky. But as he entered the forest portion of his walk, it grew quite difficult, and he began to stumble over tree roots and over branches. Then suddenly in the distance, he saw a bright light in the forest. He walked towards this light like a moth to a flame. And when he got there, he realized it was a great big glowing ball sitting on the forest floor. Anansi was amazed at his discovery. He thought it was so beautiful that he should bring it home to his family. So he picked up that great big glowing ball and he began to walk with it, but it was awkward and it was difficult for him to see his steps now because the ball was in the way. Well, he stumbled and tumbled, and then he was on the edge of a ravine, and he slipped off that ravine, and with the ball still clutched to him, he tumbled down, down, down into the ravine. At the bottom of the ravine, there was a great wide river, and he plunged into the depths of that river. And just as he did so, a giant fish came swimming along, was attracted by that ball of light, and scooped up Anansi and the glowing ball in its jaws in one big swallow. Anansi was terrified, and he thought to himself, if anyone can save me, I will give them this glowing ball as a reward. Meanwhile, back home, Anansi's wife, Aso, was getting very worried. For if there's one thing that's true about Anansi, he has a monstrous appetite, and Aso knew Anansi was never late for dinner. She called all her children to her and she expressed her concern. There were 3 boys and 3 girls. The girls were named Seas Trouble, Drinks River, and Cushion. The boys were named Road Builder, Hide Skinner, and Stone Thrower. When Aso explained about her concern for their father, Seas Trouble put a finger to her temple and she said, Mother, father is in grave trouble. He is inside a fish, in a river. Well, Aso was very upset. And she thought, well, how can we go? We need to help your father, but how can we go? Road Builder stepped up and said, Mother, I think I can find the way. And so with Road Builder leading the way and the family following, they arrived on the banks of the river. They peered into the depths of the dark, dark river, but of course they couldn't see anything. Drinks River stepped up and said, Mother, I think I can help. And she began to drink up that river till it was all gone. And there was nothing but the dry riverbed. And flopping at the bottom of that riverbed, they saw a giant fish. Well, Hide Skinner stepped up. Mother, I can help. And he took out his knife that he always carried with him. And he went over to that fish and he cut open the belly of the fish. And out jumped Anansi with the glowing ball. But just then, a huge, huge bird flew overhead, attracted by the ball, flew down, grabbed Anansi with the ball in his hand still, caught it up, and flew up and hovered high above the family. Well, Cushion said, Father, you can drop on me. And she lay down on the ground. And then Stone Thrower said, I can help. And he picked up a stone from the riverbed and he threw it at that great big bird, hit it on the side of the head. And in its surprise, the bird dropped Anansi. Anansi landed with the glowing ball, bounced on Cushion, and then landed softly on the ground. Anansi was so pleased to see his family and to be saved. But he said, well, I thought to myself that I would give the glowing ball to anyone who saved me. But you have all worked to get here to save me. And he says, children, I'm so surprised at you because you're always talking about who's the better person and who's the best one and who has the best talents. And today you worked together to save me. I'm so proud of you, he said. Well, he thought, what could he do? How could he divide up that big glowing ball to give to all his children? But after a moment, Oso stepped up and said, I think I know what we can do. We can take that glowing ball and we can all together throw it up into the sky. And then it will be there for whenever a traveler travels at night and they need a light to see. So that is exactly what they did. They picked up that glowing ball and they counted 1, 2, 3, and threw up that ball into the sky. And that is where it remains to this day. And we know it as the moon. Here's a song about love with a condition attached. Daisy, Daisy. Daisy, Daisy, give me your answer due. I'm half crazy, all for the love of you. It won't be a stylish marriage. I can't afford a carriage, but you'll look sweet upon the seat of a bicycle built for two. All right, let's do that verse again, shall we? All together. Daisy, Daisy, give me your answer due. I'm half crazy, all for the love of you. It won't be a stylish marriage. I can't afford a carriage, but you'll look sweet upon the seat of a bicycle built for two. Now here's Daisy's answer. Michael, Michael, here is your answer true. I'm not crazy, all for the love of you. There won't be any marriage if you can't afford a carriage, 'cause I'll get switched if I get hitched on a bicycle built for two. And now it's time for a romantic love story. This is a folk tale from China. It's called Hou-yi Chang-er and the 9 Suns. Once upon a time, there were 10 suns shining in the sky. The heat from those 10 suns was so intense that it often scorched the crops, and it affected the people's health in a terrible way. The Emperor of Heaven called on Hou-yi, the famous archer, for help. Hou-yi was honored by the Emperor of Heaven's request and readily agreed. He climbed to the top of Kunlun Mountain, and when he got there, he pulled an arrow from his quiver and he pulled his bowstring back as hard as he could, and he released the arrow and it pierced one of the suns and it fell down into the sea, sizzled and disappeared. One after the other, Hou-yi pulled arrows from his quiver and he shot down 9 of those 10 suns. Well, there was 1 sun left in the sky, and that was perfect, for the people were able to grow plentiful crops, and they no longer suffered from the unbearable heat. The Emperor of Heaven was very pleased, as was the Queen of Heaven, and Hou-yi became very famous, and people came from far and wide around the world to learn from the famous archer. The Queen of Heaven was so pleased that she gave Hou-yi a gift, an elixir. She said, anyone who drinks the elixir will become immortal. While Hou-yi was grateful for the gift, he did not want to leave his dear wife Chang-er behind on earth. And so he said to Chang-er, put the elixir away for safekeeping. And she did. Now, Chang-er and Hou-yi should have lived a very happy life together after that, but alas, not everyone is born with a healthy sense of morals. Hou-yi was a famous archer, and Chang-er was known for her kindness, especially to the poor. But they were, in fact, duped by a greedy person. One day when Hou-yi was out hunting, Pang Meng, one of his students, a greedy person, went to Hou-yi and Chang-er's house and demanded that Chang-er give him the elixir. Poor Chang-er, instead of giving the elixir to this greedy person, she decided to drink it herself. She drank it down, and when the vial was completely empty, she began to float up. She floated out the window, up, up, up into the sky, higher and higher and higher she went. She managed to stop on the moon, the place closest to Earth. There she became immortal. When Hou-yi returned home from his hunting trip and he found Chang-er missing, he was devastated, and he ran outside and he called out, Chang-er, Chang-er, Chang-er. And that's when he noticed. When he looked up at the moon, on the surface of the moon, there was a figure that looked just like his wife. So he ran to get some of Chang-er's favorite food, and he brought it to an altar as a sacrifice, a tribute to his dear wife. When others heard that Chang-er had become a goddess, they too brought food to the altar in hopes of attaining her blessings of health and good fortune. Ever since then, every year at the Mid-Autumn Festival in October, people come and they make sacrifices of food to the great goddess Chang-er. Now, you might be looking out the window one night, and you might see that bright moon in the sky, and perhaps you will see the figure of Chang-er on the moon's surface. And then you too will have seen the goddess of the moon, Chang-er, who lives there still. I can't think of a better way to follow up that story and to finish our time together than with a song called By the Light of the Silvery Moon. If you know it, please sing along. by the light of the silvery moon. I want a spoon, to my honey I'll croon love's tune. Honeymoon, keep a shining in June. Your silvery beams will bring love's dreams. We'll be cuddling soon by the silvery moon. Well, that's short, so let's do it one more time. Everybody now. By the light of the silvery moon, I want a spoon, to my honey I'll croon love's tune. Honeymoon, keep a shining in June. Your silvery beams will bring love's dreams. We'll be cuddling soon by the silvery moon. Thank you so much for watching. I wish you all a happy rest of February, and we'll see you again soon.